Hello, everyone. My name is Darius Graham, and today I'm going to be presenting Chapter 11 in our textbook, which is on traditional leadership approaches. So, the chapter begins with defining leadership and influence. Leadership as a process involves the use of non-coercive influence. Leadership as a property is a set of characteristics attributed to someone who is perceived to use influence successfully. The influence is the ability to affect the perceptions, beliefs, attitudes, motivation, and/or behaviors of others. So, leadership and influence tie hand in hand. Leadership basically saying that you possess the characteristics to influence people to do things that you want them to do. And the second slide is a slide that goes over leadership and management. So, there's a difference between leadership and management. Leadership and management are related, but they are not the same. A person can be a manager and a leader, or both, or neither. Managers manage preset rules and regulations, while leaders do the same, but they have a way of adding their own personal spin to those rules and regulations. Some of you might have worked for some managers who weren't actually leaders, and you may have worked for some leaders who weren't actually managers. I know in my current job, we have a guy that he works under me. He's a very good leader, and he leads our team in sales a lot. And on the difference is he's just not a manager, so he doesn't have the title, but he can lead. But he just leads without the title. All right, on the next slide is continue talking about management and leadership. Being a manager does not ensure that a person is also a leader. Any given manager may or may not also be a leader. Leadership positions can be formal. Someone appointed to a head group has leadership qualities. And then it can also be informal, when a leader emerges from the ranks of the group according to a consensus of the members. So you may have all of you may have seen both examples of leadership, formal and informal. With my current role, my current role is more of an informal leadership role because I started from being a regular sales rep and I worked my way all the way up through management. On the next slide, it's talking about the early approaches to leadership. And this is where we get into the leadership theories that are discussed within this chapter. The first theory is a trait approach. So the trait approach attempted to identify stable and enduring character traits that differentiate effective leaders from non-leaders. So the trait approach basically says that leaders have certain traits that they possess that others do not possess. As you read along in the chapter, you may see that this was an early on discussion of leadership, and not many people use this trait anymore because we've also figured out that leadership isn't just traits that you possess more than others. So yeah, it's kind of getting away from it. Early researchers believed that leaders such as Hitler, Lincoln, Napoleon, Joan of Arc, and Gandhi had some unique set of qualities or traits that distinguished them from their peers. On the next slide, it's talking about behavioral approaches to leadership. So these approaches, behavioral approach tried to identify behaviors that differentiated effective leaders from non-leaders. So basically saying that leaders behave much different from non-leaders. The trait approach to leadership focuses on stable and identifiable effective leaders from non-leaders. Gandhi was seen as an outstanding leader in part because of his integrity and humility. So basically saying that effective leaders do have certain traits that are identifiable by others, which make them want to follow them instead of leading themselves. On the next slide, it's talking about the Michigan State studies. So these studies were it was two studies conducted, one at Michigan State and one at Ohio State University. Michigan and one at Ohio State University. The Michigan Leadership Studies define job-centered and employee-centered leadership as opposite ends of a single leadership dimension. So, job-centered leader behavior pays close attention to the work of subordinates, explains work procedure, and is mainly interested in performance. The leader's primary concern is the task. So, many of you may have worked for someone like that before, where they didn't really get too involved in what the employee felt or did, or whatever. Their main concern was just making sure you got the job done. Employee-centered leader behavior attempts to build effective work groups with high performance goals. The leader's main concern with high performance, but that is to be achieved by paying attention to the human aspects of the group. So many of you may have worked with these kind of leaders too, where they focus more on you as an employee instead of just only focusing on a task at hand. On the next slide, we're going to discuss the Ohio State study. So the Ohio State study said that leadership studies define leader consideration and initiating structured behaviors as independent dimensions of leadership. So consideration behavior is concerned with the subordinate's feelings and respects subordinate's ideas. So these kind of leaders, I haven't ran into many of these kind of people because today people are so task oriented and focus so much on task, and no one really cares about how the employees feel. But the successful organizations have leaders that focus on these kind of things. So the initiating structured behavior, on the other hand, the leader clearly defines the leader-subordinate role so that subordinates know what is expected of them. So this is these might be one of those leaders who lay down the rules and regulations and before you start your job to let you know exactly what's expected of you and exactly how you're supposed to go about doing your job or your task or anything like that. On the next slide, we're going to be talking about the LPC theory of leadership. The LPC theory of leadership suggests that a leader's effectiveness depends on the situation. So this is saying that you can be an effective leader, but it all depends on the kind of situation that you're in. The author of this theory, Fielder, and his associates maintain that leadership effectiveness depends on the match between the leader's personality and the situation. So you can be a great leader in certain situations, is what this theory is saying. Not all situations may put you in a situation where you're going to be a great leader. Some leaders are more effective in certain situations than others. On the next slide, we're going over the path-goal theory of leadership. So the path-goal theory of leadership suggests that effective leaders clarify the paths, behaviors that will lead to desired rewards and goals. So these kind of leaders basically let you know everything that's expected of you, let you know what you're supposed to do, and when you do, and they let you know when you do those things that you will be rewarded for your task and your completion of these things. The path-goal theory identifies 4 kinds of leader behaviors: directive, supportive, participative, and achievement-oriented. All right, on the next slide, we're going to be talking about Vroom's decision tree approach to leadership. Vroom's decision tree approach to leadership attempts to prescribe how much participation subordinates should be allowed in making decisions. So this basically says gives the subordinates leeway to help with decision making within the company or organization. Vroom's decision tree approach assumes that the degree to which subordinates should be encouraged to participate in decision making depends on the characteristics of the decision. So that's pretty self-explanatory. No one decision-making process is best for all situations. I strongly agree with that statement because if you try to handle each situation the same, with the same outcome and the same ways of going about it, you will not get the same result every time because, like the book says, no one decision-making process is best for all situations. All right. Now, my question to you all is, which leadership theory discussed within this presentation have you used in the past, or do you plan on using any of these leadership theories in the future? Thank you guys for taking your time to listen to my presentation, and I look forward to hearing your feedback.